Hello, I'm Matt Evans, and welcome to Board Game Replay. Today we're going to be learning how to play Lords of Hellas, designed by Adam Kopinski and published by Awaken Realms. There are two different game modes in Lords of Hellas, solo or multiplayer. This video will be featuring the multiplayer and cover everything from the setup through the full rules of the game. This multiplayer mode supports anywhere from 2 to 4 players, but for the sake of this video, we'll be assuming you're playing a 4-player game. There are some slight rules changes to 2 and 3 players, and we're going to cover those at the end of the video. Alright, with that being said, let's get to it. To set up the game, you'll first need to set up the game board. This board is double-sided with one side for the multiplayer game and the other for the solo and campaign play. This video will focus on the multiplayer game, so I'll choose the side with this temples icon at the bottom right. Next, place the monument foundations and their corresponding God's artifact card underneath. The northernmost space is for Zeus, whose base looks like this. The westmost space is for Hermes, whose base looks like this. And the eastmost space is for Athena, whose base looks like this. Next, shuffle the events, monster attack, and combat cards and place them in their appropriate spaces. Also, set aside the special artifact cards that are assigned to monsters and shuffle the remaining neutral artifact cards and place them on the board as well. Next, combine all blessing cards from the gods whose monuments will be present in this game. As we're just covering the core game, we'll combine and shuffle together the Zeus, Hermes, and Athena cards into one deck. Then take the monster die, monster wound markers, glory tokens, and quest tokens, and place them to the side of the board. Do the same for the monster miniatures, monster trays, monument parts, and monument activation card. Now shuffle the temple cards. Draw one and place it on the space on the board. Then fill in the spaces with the temple and Oracle of Delphi tokens. Now prepare the starting events. Draw 7 cards from the event deck and resolve them one at a time as follows. A quest card is placed in the available space here on the board. Once a quest card is placed, also place the relevant quest token in the region outlined on the quest card. For a monster event, place its corresponding miniature in the region indicated by the card, and place the monster tray as well as its assigned artifact card next to the board. If all 3 quest cards are filled during the setup phase, simply discard any subsequent quest cards and do not draw a replacement. If a quest card is discarded this way, it will still count toward the total 7 cards drawn during this phase. However, if a drawn monster card shows a monster which is already on the board, ignore this card, discard it, and immediately draw a replacement event card. Once completed, take any discarded event cards and shuffle them back into the events deck. Next, each player will draw a single combat card, keeping it secret, and also take one of the reference sheets, known as a help tray. Now we're just about done with the setup, but before we finish I want to jump ahead just a little bit and talk about the board layout and game objectives. The board represents a large map which is broken up into different colored sections. The smallest of these sections are called regions and are marked with a population strength represented by this symbol. At the start of the game, regions are considered neutral, so in order to take control, a player will have to enter the region with a number of hoplites equal to or greater than this number. Once they've done that, a control token will be placed, and this population strength can be ignored going forward. For your first few games, it might be helpful to slide the control marker on top of the population strength, just as a reminder that this territory is no longer neutral and that you could ignore that number going forward. Each region also contains either a city or a shrine, or sometimes they have both. Cities are used to recruit additional hoplites, as well as boost defenses in combat. Shrines represent spaces where temples can be built. There are also 2 special regions containing the City of Sparta and the Oracle of Delphi. These are essentially more powerful versions of cities and temples respectively, and we'll cover them more in detail a little bit later. As you saw during the setup, some regions also contain monuments to the gods. By controlling those regions, a player will be granted the god's artifact power of the relevant monument. You may also notice that there's a 4th monument space that is currently empty. This is reserved for expansion content and is not used in the core game. Lastly, all of the regions on the board make up the larger sections of the map called lands. Each land consists of 3 to 4 regions of the same color. These are important to take note of, as control of different lands are one of the many ways to win the game. With that said, there are actually 4 different ways to become the Lord of Hellas and declare victory over your opponents. A game will end immediately when a player meets one of the following victory conditions. Number 1, control 2 lands. Number 2, control 5 regions with temples. Number 3, slay 3 monsters. And the 4th victory condition is activated once any monument is fully built. Whomever controls a region with a fully built monument after 3 rounds wins the game. Now, there's a little more detail to this one, but I'll cover that towards the end. Alright, now that we know a bit more about what's going on with the game board, let's finish the setup. Now you're going to randomly determine a starting player. The starting player picked from one of 4 available heroes, as well as an army. All heroes have unique powers and attributes, while armies only differ by their model and colors, so players are free to mix and match. Once they've chosen, they'll take all Hoplite and Priest models of their color, as well as control tokens, and place this colored ring around the base of their hero. Then the player takes 6 use action tokens, along with 3 attribute tokens, and places them on the leadership, strength, and speed attributes like so. Next, resolve the starting power of the hero. In the case with Heracles, we'll adjust his strength attribute to 2. The starting player then places their hero along with 2 hoplites in one region on the board. If the population strength of a region is 2 or less, immediately place a control marker on that space. This now completes the player's startup. Moving counterclockwise, the next player will then choose one of the remaining heroes and armies, following the same process as before. However, when placing their hero and hoplite figures, they may not be placed in a region containing another hero. The last player to choose and place their hero will begin the game. A game of Lords of Hellas is played over a number of rounds, with each player taking turns in clockwise order. On a player's turn, they'll first begin with regular actions. A player may perform any, all, or none of these actions in whatever order they choose. However, each action may only be performed once. After completing the regular actions, they'll perform one of the various special actions, and then play will pass to the next player in clockwise order. And we'll start by first explaining the regular actions, starting with using artifacts. Artifacts are obtained through various actions and give players special powers that can be used to give them an advantage. Whenever a player gains an artifact card, it will be in the charged state. During this regular action, a player may use any number of these charged artifact cards. Once these artifact cards have been used, they'll be turned sideways to indicate they are no longer charged and can be only refreshed during a Build Monument special action. We'll cover that more a little bit later. There are also some artifact cards that specify a time to be played. Those of course can be played at that time, outside of this action. Next, let's look at prayer. This action represents players sending their priests to the various monuments on the board, paying respects to the gods and gaining their favor. Priests begin the game as part of your army in the general supply here, but certain actions in the game will allow you to add 1 or more priests to your priest pool. During this action, a player can send any single priest from their priest pool to any chosen monument to gain their benefits. The provided player help tray should be referenced here. So for example, if I send a priest here to Zeus's monument, which is currently level 3, my hero would gain 1 strength and draw 2 combat cards. As another example, if I send a priest to Athena's monument here at level 1, my hero would gain 1 leadership, but that would be all, as there is no god power for level 1. Each monument has 2 priest spaces, and when they are full, no additional priest may be added to that monument. If all monument spaces on the board are occupied, the prayer action cannot be taken. These priest spaces remain occupied until a player uses the Build Monument special action. Now let's talk Hoplite movement. Hoplite movement allows a player to move a number of hoplites equal to the current level of their hero's leadership attribute. At the start of the game, the Heracles player has a leadership value of 1, so he can move 1 hoplite to any neighboring region. A neighboring region is any region that is either physically adjacent or connected by a sea trail. A hoplite can use its movement to be fortified into a city or move out of fortification back into the region. Just treat the city or fortification as you would an adjacent region for movement. A fortified hoplite gives an additional +1 army strength during a battle, and we'll get more into battles shortly. Now let's assume it's further into the game and the Heracles player has a leadership attribute of 3. This means he can move up to 3 different hoplites as his hoplite movement action. In this case, he'll choose to move these 2 hoplites here, overcoming the population strength of 2 and immediately placing a control marker, and his 3rd hoplite will move here. The region is currently controlled by the yellow player, but since there are no hoplites there to defend, he'll immediately replace the yellow control token with one of his own. You'll notice that we ignored the population strength of this region as it had already been overcome before. Since this region contains the Hermes monument, he'll also take the God's artifact card from the yellow player. If during movement a hoplite enters a region with 1 or more enemy hoplites, they will trigger a battle. First, complete all movements with any remaining hoplites and resolve the battle. If there are multiple battles occurring, the attacking player chooses the order. Speaking of battles, this is a good time to talk about how they're resolved. I just mentioned a battle being triggered from a Hoplite movement action, but there are a number of other game effects that can also move Hoplites outside of that action, but battles are always triggered the same way. If there are ever two different players' Hoplites meeting in the same region, a battle will occur. The goal of a battle is to have a higher total army strength than your opponent, and each Hoplite figure present adds 1 to its controlling player's army strength. In addition, players can also play combat cards to boost their army strength and give them an edge in battle. When a battle begins, first the defending player can play 1 combat card from their hand, gaining the army strength and resolving any effects on the card. They can also choose not to play a card and pass. If they do pass, then they cannot play any more combat cards during this battle. Next, the attacking player can play 1 combat card in the same way. Again, if they pass, they can also no longer play cards during this battle. This sequence is repeated with both players resolving cards back and forth until both players pass. Once both players have passed, battle is resolved by comparing the total strength of each army. The player with the highest total strength wins the battle. If there is a tie, the defending player wins. Now before we go any further, let's look more closely at combat cards. First, with combat cards, there's a hand limit of 4 during the game. A player may draw above 4 combat cards, but must immediately choose and discard down to 4 before proceeding. A player's combat cards are private, so they should be kept secret from other players until they've been played. During a battle, you will only use the bottom half of a card and the number in the middle. The red text and symbols at the top are used during a monster hunt, which we'll cover later. The number in the middle is referred to as the card strength and is the number of strength added to your army when played. Just below that, you have an additional special effect for battle. At the bottom right of the card, there may be 1 or more casualty symbols. The stronger the combat card, the more casualties your Hoplites will be forced to suffer. For each casualty symbol, one of your own Hoplites will be killed at the end of the battle. On some cards, there is also this 1 player icon in the top right, and that is strictly for the solo play and can be ignored here. To better illustrate how a battle works, we've got another example of a battle taking place here, with 4 of the Hermes players' Hoplites attacking a region with 3 of the Perseus players' Hoplites, one of which is fortified. As of right now, the combat strength of both sides is 4, 1 for each Hoplite present, and an additional +1 bonus for the fortified Hoplite. Note the Perseus hero figure is also present in this battle, but it has no effect on army strength. In general, heroes do not contribute strength or affect the battle unless otherwise granted from a special hero or god power. Since the Perseus player is a defender, they will get to choose a combat card to play first. They've chosen to play Wild Attack. The card strength is 3, which is added to their attack value, and there is now 1 casualty symbol to be resolved at the end. This brings their army strength to 7. The attacking player now plays Flank Attack. The card strength here is 2, and there is also an effect granting 2 additional army strength since they have more Hoplites than their opponent in this battle. Note this card also includes a casualty. The total army strength of the attacking player is now 8. The defending player responds by playing Fortification, gaining 1 army strength, and since they are currently defending in a region with a city, adding an additional 2 strength from the card effect, bringing their total strength to 10. The attacking player then plays Phalanx, gaining 2 strength from the card, then gaining an additional 2 strength from having 4 Hoplites in the region, thanks to the card effect. It's important to note for this card that you only count your own Hoplites in this battle. This card also adds another casualty. The defending player responds by playing the last card in their hand, Javelin Volley. This card only grants them the base 2 strength because they have fewer Hoplites than their opponent, so the card effect does not apply. This does, however, raise their army strength to 12, tying the attacking player. As defenders win ties, this player could still win the battle. However, the attacking player responds with a Wild Attack card, adding 3 strength and yet another casualty symbol. Having no remaining cards, the defending player passes, and the attacking player passes as well. Since both players have now passed, no more cards can be played. The attacking player wins the battle. Players now kill a number of their own Hoplites from the battle, equal to the number of casualty symbols on any cards they played, regardless of whether they won or lost. Any fortified Hoplites are always killed last. Any combat cards played in this battle should be discarded. The loser of the battle then kills an additional Hoplite and has to withdraw to a neighboring region of their choosing. However, they cannot withdraw to a region with another player's Hoplites present. If they are unable to withdraw to any region because of this, all of their Hoplites are killed. Lastly, the winner of the battle then takes control from the owner of the region, and the battle is complete. Now for the sake of example, let's assume the battle went differently and that the defending player actually won. I've also added an additional Hoplite to the attacking player's army to help illustrate this example. The attacker and defender would both still kill units due to the casualties on their combat cards, so 3 for the attacking player, and 1 for the defending player. Then the attacking player would kill an additional Hoplite from losing the battle. Then any remaining Hoplites are forced to withdraw to the region from which they attacked. There is also the possibility of what's called a Pyrrhic victory for the attacker. If the attacker wins the battle, but sustains losses so that they have no Hoplites remaining, they are still considered the winner, but they cannot take control of that region. Now let's move on to the final regular action, Hero Movement. For this action, a player can move their hero a number of regions up to the value of their speed attribute. Heracles currently has a speed attribute value of 2. Heroes can move and stop in any region regardless of the presence of enemy hoplites or heroes. They can also do the same for monsters. If a hero ends their movement in a region with a quest token, they can immediately move to a quest step assigned to that quest, as long as they meet the requirements. Taking a closer look at this quest card, you can see the 3 different steps of a quest and what they require. The first step has the most basic requirements, and each subsequent step has increased requirements. So for example, this quest's first step requires a hero strength of 2. Since Heracles meets this requirement, he may place his figure on this step and begin the quest. If he had 4 strength, he'd be able to start at this step instead. Once a hero is assigned to a quest, they must remain there until the quest has been completed. During a future turn, if a hero is assigned to a quest during the hero movement phase, they will simply advance 1 step of the quest, even if they don't meet the requirements for that next step. When a hero moves on to the final step of a quest, that quest will be completed. Also, if one hero is assigned to a quest, another hero can start the same quest at a higher step and finish it before them, as long as they meet the requirements. Also, if a hero is ever able to meet the requirements for the 3rd step of a quest, they can immediately complete it as well. When a quest is complete, that player returns to the region where they started the quest and receives the reward shown on the quest card. They will also receive the glory token matching the color of the region in which that quest was completed. If another player is already holding this token, they will take it from them. Now that the quest is completed, we can remove the quest token from the board, and the quest card is discarded. You do not draw a replacement. Now that we've explained all the regular actions, I just want to mention again that each of these actions can be done in any order, they are optional, and they can only be performed once. In addition, you must fully resolve one of the regular actions before moving on to another. So for example, you couldn't use an artifact, then trigger your Hoplite movement, and then use another artifact. It must all be done at once. After completing their regular actions, a player must then take one of the available special actions. When a player chooses a special action, they place a used action token on top of that space. This action will now remain unavailable until that token is removed. Once this special action is complete, the turn will pass to the next player in clockwise order, who will begin with their regular actions. Now let's walk through each of these special actions. First, recruit. In taking this action, a player can recruit up to 2 hoplites in every region they control with a city. If they control Sparta, they can recruit up to 4 hoplites in that region. So if the Heracles player took the recruit action, they could add an additional 2 hoplites to all of these regions, since they are regions with their control marker and they have cities. If any of the cities have an empty fortification space, a hoplite can be added directly to that. Now let's look at the march action. This action allows a player to move any number of hoplites from one region to an adjacent region. Fortified hoplites cannot be moved with this action though. And remember, if these move hoplites enter a space with another player's hoplites, a battle will immediately ensue. Next, the build temple action. This action allows a player to build a temple in a region they control with a shrine. The player takes one of the temples from the temple card on the board and places it on top of the shrine in that region. They also add 1 priest to their priest pool. If the player built the Oracle of Delphi, they receive the additional rewards listed on the temple card. If, when taking a temple from the temple card, a red draft symbol is revealed, a draft of blessing cards will now begin. When a draft is triggered, draw a number of cards from the blessing deck equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 4-player game, you would draw 5 cards. Starting with the player who just built the temple, each player chooses one of these cards and passes the remaining cards to their right or counterclockwise. These blessing cards are powerful, permanent upgrades for your army and must remain face up next to your hero for the rest of the game. As you can see, each god present in the game has a different looking blessing card which grants skills and abilities related to that god. Once all players have received a card, you can discard the extra card next to the board. Now, let's look at the prepare action. This action allows a player to choose any two actions from those listed here. They can even choose the same action twice. First off, they can heal an injury on their hero. Simply flip the attribute token from the injured side back to the normal side. We'll talk about how a hero can become injured in just a bit. They can also draw a combat card or recruit a Hoplite into the region with their hero. Though, they cannot take this action if their hero is currently on a quest or is currently in a space with another player's Hoplites. Next, let's look at the Usurp action. If a player possesses a glory token which matches the color of the region where their hero is currently located, they can instantly take control over that region, pushing all other Hoplites out. All enemy Hoplites must withdraw from the region, but suffer no losses. The current player can also recruit one Hoplite there, and can be placed directly into fortification, if applicable. When enemy Hoplites have been forced to withdraw, just like a battle, they cannot withdraw to a region with another player's Hoplites. If they are unable to withdraw because of this, all of their Hoplites are killed. Also, using this Usurp action does not cause the player to discard their glory token. As I mentioned earlier, glory tokens can be obtained from completing quests, but they can also be earned from defeating monsters in a hunt, which we'll cover next. Taking the Hunt special action allows a player to begin hunting a monster present in the same region as their hero. When a hunt begins, that player will gather the appropriate monster reference tray, as well as the damage tokens, and place them in front of them. Then they will draw a number of combat cards equal to their hero's strength attribute. It's important to note that during this hunt phase of the game, the combat card hand limit no longer applies. A player can be holding any number of combat cards they like, but will need to discard back down to 4 when the hunt ends. A hunt is broken down into 2 phases. First, the hero attacks, followed by the monster. During the hero attack phase, the player will discard 1 or more combat cards with symbols matching the ones shown in the monster tray. As a reminder, these are the same combat cards that are used in battle, but for a monster hunt, we only pay attention to the card's strength, the weapon symbol, and any special effects here. For each matching card played this way, they will inflict 1 wound on the monster and place a damage token on the appropriate wound space. A hero must deal at least 1 wound to the monster this way, otherwise the hunt will end immediately. A hero can inflict multiple wounds at once and even slay the monster right away if they have the appropriate cards. Some wound spaces also have the symbol of a priest or artifact printed on them. Wounding these spaces grant rewards at the end of the hunt. Now, if the monster has not been slain, we move on to the monster attack phase. Here, the person to the left of the player currently fighting the monster will now act as the monster and attack the hero. This player will draw 2 cards from the monster attack deck and choose 1 to play. Looking closer at a monster attack card, this number is the monster attack strength, and below that is the card effect. Once a monster attack card has been chosen, the hero player will then decide if they want to defend or not defend this attack. In order to defend, they'll need to discard 1 or more combat cards with a combined strength that is equal to or greater than the attack strength of the monster. If they do, they have successfully defended the attack, and the monster attack card is discarded without further effect. The hero player then draws 2 combat cards, and the gameplay returns to the hero attack phase. If the hero player chooses not to defend a monster attack, they will then suffer the effect printed on the monster attack card. Many of these effects deal injuries to the hero. Some can end the hunt immediately, and others will trigger the unique special attack of the monster. Cerberus here, for example, would make the hero take 3 injuries. If a hero is instructed to take an injury, they choose an attribute and then flip the token on that attribute to its injured side. Notice that they do not move the position of this token. As long as this injury remains, the value of that attribute is reduced to 1. If a hero is ever instructed to take an injury and all other attributes are already injured, the hunt will end immediately. After the hero player has resolved the effects of the monster attack card, if they were not forced to end the hunt due to injuries or effects, they draw 1 combat card and gameplay returns to the hero attack phase. The hero player then has another chance to wound and potentially slay the monster. Remember, if they are unable to deal at least 1 wound to the monster during this phase, the hunt will end. If the hunt ends for any reason and the monster was not slain, the hero player takes 1 additional injury, if able, and then if any wound markers placed during this hunt had a priest or artifact symbol on them, the player can then add 1 priest to their priest pool, or draw 1 neutral artifact card, respectively. Regardless of how many of these reward spaces were wounded, the player only collects 1 total reward. Going forward, all wounds will remain on this monster, so any player that hunts this monster in a future action will begin where the previous player left off, and this player's turn is over. If they have more than 4 combat cards in their hand, they'll need to discard down, Play then passes to the next player in clockwise order. However, if a player is able to slay the monster by wounding all its spaces, the hunt is successful and the player collects a reward. For this reward, the player can choose from either one of the special reward wound spaces of that monster, if they were placed during this hunt, or instead receive the unique artifact for that monster. Again, the player still only receives one total reward. The player then removes that monster figure from the board and places it in their play area. If this is the third monster they've slain, they immediately win the game. Now that the hunt is over, if they have greater than 4 combat cards, they'll need to discard down, and then play passes to the next player. The final special action is the Build Monument action. When a player chooses this action, they choose the monument they want to build on and add the next piece to it. All priests are then removed from all monuments and go back to their controlling player's army. They are not returned to the priest pool. The player who took this special action then receives a number of priests equal to the number of temples they currently control. The Oracle of Delphi counts as a temple for this as well. Next, all players remove their used action tokens from their player boards and charge any used artifacts. If the player built the 5th and final level of a monument, that will bring the monument activation card into play. They will place this card in front of them and place 3 of their used action tokens on these spaces. The game will now effectively end in 3 rounds. Going forward, whenever this player takes their special action on their turn, they must remove one of these used action tokens from this card. After the final token has been removed, the player who controls the region with that fully built monument wins the game. If a player has completed the Build Monument special action, we proceed to the Monster phase. During the Monster phase, the player who performed the Build Monument action will roll the monster die for every monster on the map in the order of their choosing. This monster die has 4 possible results. With this facing, nothing happens with the monster. With this facing, the monster must be moved to an adjacent region. With this facing, the monster resolves the region attack printed on their monster reference tray. And this is the final result. This result means the player who took the Build Monument action decides whether this monster will resolve its region attack or move to an adjacent region. After all monsters have been activated this way, play proceeds to the Event phase. For the Event phase, the player who took the Build Monument special action draws the top card from the events deck and resolves it. If it is a quest card and there is a free quest slot, the card will be placed there and the quest token placed on the indicated region on the board. If there is no free quest slot, simply discard this card without effect. If the card drawn was a monster card, there are a few possible outcomes. If the monster is not on the map, place its figure in the region indicated on the card and place the monster tray and artifact card next to the board, just like we did during the setup. If the monster is already on the map, it evolves. You place the drawn card underneath the monster tray like so, adding either additional spaces to wound or other special effects to that monster going forward. Lastly, if the monster on the card that was drawn has already been slain, discard that card and draw another card from the events deck. After the event phase, the next player in clockwise order begins their turn, and play continues from there. Play will continue like this until the player reaches one of the 4 victory conditions. So that should be everything you need to know to play the 4-player game of Lords of Hellas. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are some slight rules changes for 2 and 3 players. In a 3-player game, the Warlord of Hellas victory condition, which is controlling 2 lands, is changed so that blue land does not count toward this victory condition. A 2-player game has a few more changes. First, the Warlord of Hellas victory condition is changed so that you need to control 3 lands instead of 2. Also, you completely ignore the King of Kings victory condition, which is the condition triggered by fully building a monument. In addition, before taking the Build Monument special action in a 2-player game, a player can choose one of their special actions that already has a used token and immediately take that action before resolving the Build Monument action. These extra rules for different player counts can be found on page 5 and 15 of the rulebook. Alright, well I think that'll wrap it up for us. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I want to thank you very much for watching, and lastly I want to leave you with some shots of the terrain expansion being deployed on the board. This terrain expansion features plastic miniatures for all of the cities and temples in the game, giving you a bit more of a 3D experience for those components. Alright, thanks again. See you soon.